Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic lights. And I really wanna know, if I'll ever figure out where the road goes. Even if I'm falling down, I will keep on searching for my highs. You can say I lost my mind, I will keep on holding my head high, even if the sky is falling down.
All right, guys, it has been a while since I've gone live. I will be honest, I've been super lazy with going live this summer. I've just been recording, but I've got a super special guest today, Carly. Carly and I haven't known each other very long, but as soon as we met, we hit it off. And actually, TJ Lonergan, we had him on the show like, it's been years ago at this point. I need to have him on again. But he's the one that introduced us, and he pretty much had to like drag us apart in the parking lot because he was going to be late for an appointment because we wouldn't stop talking because we hit it off literally right away. So I was excited to have her on today because I love her. I love her, first of all. And I think she's got a really awesome story that I thought everybody would really love, especially on the podcast itself. A lot of the things related to entrepreneurship, like kind of going from that 9-to-5 to entrepreneurship, that's something that a lot of people are kind of looking for right now. I think a lot of people are kind of searching for, their purpose, their why, their meaning. And, not that you can't find that in a 9-to-5, but sometimes we feel like we're stuck in a position that we necessarily don't want to be in our jobs. And I think it's important to kind of have these discussions that, that way people know that they can have other options if they choose. If they love the 9-to-5, great, love it, that's great. But if you choose that you want to start to transition, I think it's important to hear these stories on how other people have done so, because, it gives them kind of that oomph to go ahead and do something they feel kind of led to do. But Carly, I'm gonna let you jump in and kind of tell everybody a little bit about, who you are, and then we'll just kind of start a chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Maria. I am super excited to be on here. And also just kind of commenting on what you said, like we really were like inseparable at the beginning. So I'm so glad that we finally made this work. So, but yeah, I relate to that stuck position that you were mentioning. And that was where I was. So I'm a registered nurse. I've been practicing for 7 years, and I felt stuck in my day-to-day. It wasn't technically a 9-to-5, but the 12-hour shifts that we did. And I've had multiple nursing positions and knew that I wanted something more, but didn't know what that looked like, how to make that happen. And so that has been a very recent transition. I just started my own business. It's been almost a year in August. So Drops of Health is my business, and we do Raindrop Therapy and foot detoxes, but the goal is, or the backstory, I should say, is using essential oils to balance, heal, preserve, things like that. But I am excited to share because I think there's a lot of, at least my friends too, that feel stuck and don't know how to get to that next step. And so I hope that maybe, my story can help at least one person.
Absolutely. Well, and nobody, even when you hear that phrase, feeling stuck, and it just makes you feel like, blah, right? So nobody wants that feeling, no matter what it is. And, for whatever reason, somebody can, even if they loved their job previously, things can change, life can change, and their family dynamics can change, their health can change. There's so many things can change that can make that work situation, not feel the same. And then you can feel stuck though, because at that point in time, it's like, okay, well, we all realize that it takes time, obviously, to build an income in a new business. And we hear about these like overnight, like I made $10,000 today on, direct ship from Amazon. But that's not the reality for most people. Yeah. The reality for most people is it takes time to build things. Every once in a while, somebody will just be able to hit something quickly and easily. That's kind of like the business equivalent of like winning the lottery. It doesn't happen that often. Usually it's kind of like, a slow churn on getting to where you need to be. So that can be scary, right? Like, well, okay, well, I want to leave my job, but I have bills, I have a family, I have, these responsibilities. How do I kind of make that transition? And, I usually I know I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I usually recommend to people that obviously they have like a savings of, at least like 90 days, 6 months, a year would be amazing if you could do that, to be able to kind of give yourself some time to build up. Especially if you're like a single income household. If you're a double income household, obviously there's some things that can be tweaked a little bit to be able to make that a little bit of an easier journey, but not everybody has that. So it's like, you want to make sure that you have kind of that nest egg sitting there. Because even if your business has been going for a while and it goes great, everybody with a small business knows small business is feast and famine sometimes. You have to be able to kind of plan accordingly. So I would like you to kind of share a little bit of your personal journey, about leaving your job as a nurse and deciding to start your own business doing Raindrop Therapy. Like, kind of what started that? What was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, and there's so many pieces I want to touch on from what you said, because I mean, you do have to take into account the income aspect of it. It's not so easy just to get up and leave your job and start something new. So for me, it was definitely not an overnight success type thing like how people hear. Like, it's been a journey. It's taken me 7 years through my nursing career. So kind of to go back to that point, when I first got out of nursing school, pretty much within the first 6 months, I've wanted to be a nurse my whole life. Ever since I was 4 years old, when I got my first aid kit.
Yeah.
I knew from then on, like, I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to care for people. So that was kind of within me up until high school, college, and then some. And then the first 6 months when I was practicing as a nurse, it was totally different than what I thought. And not the caring for people aspect. I still love that part of it. But just like the corporate medical field was different, the way it functioned. So I knew that I wanted something different. The plan was always to become a nurse practitioner. And I looked into that, and for me, it wasn't going back to school and continuing that. So it was going to be my own business. But what was that going to be? What was that going to look like? So it's so cliche to say, but building that side hustle along your full-time income. And even so, like, my husband and I were dating at the time, and he had an income, but I've always wanted to rely on myself for funds. And so being independent, I was like, you know what, I'm going to really hustle alongside of my nursing career. So I would pick up extra nursing shifts and make extra money. And then I would spend a lot of my free time, for a couple of years building up this quote unquote business that I was doing with Young Living at the time. And then, like I said, it took about 7 years. So this was not a quick thing. And I think a lot of my friends who I've talked to have, said things like, oh, you're so lucky. And it's like, it's not luck. It's hard work. But I think people don't see all of those, little things that you're doing, all the micro work that people do. So there is some risk in it though, too. I did leave a stable income to start my own thing. So the Young Living business kind of transitioned into something of my own. But I think the biggest tip that I guess I would have for people is networking. So there's so much back work that you can do as far as like getting all the logistics and financial things set up and whatnot. But the biggest thing for me was networking and building my network and building relationships with people, because that's how you and I met, right? Like, that's how this is happening. Like, so it's literally, that's how I've gotten my clients. That's how I got my space where I work out of, my 2 locations. It was all finding the right people. Because it's not just like that first person that you meet, but like their friend or their neighbor or their mom or their aunt. And, people buy from who they know, like, and trust. So I think for me, part of that 7-year transition, the whole time I was building my foundation, which was relationships. And then, did take a leap too. So there is some risk involved. It's not just like a smooth transition where everything's just going to be exactly, you're going to make this amount of income, which you made before, and then some. I did initially take a pay cut, but I was at a point where I was like, I think I can do this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's really answering it.
No, it does. Well, and I think you mentioned risk a lot. I know, my listeners that listen on a regular basis have heard me say this so many times. They're probably like, we know, Maria, but I always say that there's risk literally involved in everything. So choosing to stay in your job as a nurse and not be all the way fulfilled, that's risk, right? choosing to go out on your own and not be sure on your income, that's also risk. So like, I think, no matter what we choose or don't choose, there's risk involved. And, for me, choosing to try these things, sometimes they've gone great and sometimes they've gone horribly on all these different things. But to me, it's worth the risk to try, because not trying, I feel like, is a bigger risk. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that feel exactly the same way. And, you may have things that you try that don't hit right. Maybe it's a timing thing. Maybe it's like whatever. There's a million things that can happen. But, if you've got that drive, you can always pivot a little bit and continue on. And I want to go back to what you were saying about networking, because I think that is a huge point that we touch on a lot. I've built everything that I've done also with networking is relationships. Relationships drive everything. And I think that is a huge piece of the puzzle that some entrepreneurs have a hard time finding, especially if they're a little bit more introverted. I always say I'm an extroverted introvert, because I very much love my alone, like bubble, like leave me alone for a while. But then when it's time for me to people, I can like, I'm peopling today. I can do that with no problem. But some people have a little bit harder time being extroverted. They're a little bit more shy or whatever. And, that is a big puzzle piece, though, is to figure out, okay, well, how can I where I'm still comfortable, with who I am as a person, but how do I still be able to kind of make those connections? Because there's lots of ways to do that. You can do in person, but you can also do, online platforms. There's lots of ways to be able to network now. And it doesn't have to necessarily be like in the same room, like I'm having to like super people today. So, I mean, I love that you mentioned that, because I think that is a key point to business. I don't know any successful businesses that don't do some type of networking, especially small businesses. So, I mean, I think that is a huge, huge point. I do want to ask you, was there like a turning point or like a moment where it like literally hit your head, where, because you said that you always wanted to be a nurse. Was there a moment, or was it just lots of things together where you were like, this is not for me?
Well, I feel like the biggest thing for me was when I was practicing as a nurse, I had all these dreams and visions of taking care of people and functioning in my own capacity. So that is kind of why I had this dream of like going on and becoming a nurse practitioner, so that I would have, I would function in this with autonomy. And so I didn't feel like I had that as a nurse. I kind of felt like I was going through the motions, and I never fully felt like it was what I wanted or what I dreamed of. Like as a little girl, I had this picture of like a nurse, and you see all the movies and the shows. And sorry, I do have dogs.
No, you're good. Your dogs are good.
So I had this vision, this dream, and it really wasn't it wasn't living up to that. And so for me, I think finding something where I still could function and help people, but do it in my own way, my own space, my own, having my own thing. And so, so I think, like I said, when I first became a nurse, I like had that aha moment. Like, I loved the care aspect, but there were so many other things that I didn't love about it, that I was like, how can I make this my own thing? And so, finding a passion, and not everybody has these like super passionate things that they want to do. And that's totally okay. But just finding something that maybe doesn't feel as much like you're being put in a box, or like you're, it's a job every day. I mean, it is a job, but it's like, some people really do love what they do. And I have found that now. And so it's been putting time and energy into that. But yeah, my aha moment was really like not within the first year of becoming a nurse, and then just finding those ways, to how, to take the next steps. And you mentioned TJ Lonergan. So he's been a huge like catalyst in all of this for me as well. Because the risk part, going back to the risk part, but I've always been someone that I would like to say takes risks, but it's still like scary when you take that initial jump. And TJ was like, just do it, just
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so it's that easy. Yeah. But it really was that easy, because I had done the micro work for 7 years. So trusting in that, and then taking the leap, and then the dominoes just kind of like it just all fell right into place. So yeah, but like, like I said, I was building that network over time. So it was still scary, but then the pieces just kind of just really fell into place. So, but I think it doesn't always have to be something that somebody is super passionate about, but just feeling like you said, you've tried so many different things. And if this one doesn't work, the next one might, but it's trying it. Because like I said, I wanted to be a nurse my whole life. And if it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, then maybe there's something more.
Absolutely. Well, and I think sometimes, I know for me, it's not necessarily that it didn't work, because there's been things that I've done that technically worked. Yeah. But I get in there and I'm like, I hate this. I don't want to do this. And it's a lot harder when it's like that. It's easy when it's like, well, this isn't working. You can quit that easily. When it's working, it's a little bit harder to quit. But still, it's like, okay, well, I don't want to do this. This is not something I want to put my time and energy into. And I love what you said about passion, because it is something we talk about a lot. And not that I don't think that we should follow our passions if we have them, but sometimes, because I've had people come and say this to me too, like sometimes it's not like this big, blinking light, or it's like, that's my passion. Sometimes it could be super like high level, like 30,000 foot view. Like, I like helping people, it could be. And then it's like, obviously there's lots of ways to help people. So you may have to try a bunch of things to figure out one that really feels like it fits with you, your family, your life, all the things. And that's another big thing that I've had to work out, because what necessarily works for Maria doesn't necessarily work with my family life, because it has to integrate, or it just doesn't work. So, I mean, I know you do Raindrop Therapy, and you did mention that. How did you discover that? I know you mentioned that, I guess I'm assuming that maybe you met somebody that did Young's Living, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah. So I got into essential oils way back when, actually, because my oldest brother had cancer at the time. So we don't have cancer in our family. So it was very like new to all of us. And I was working as a nurse's aide at the time. And a patient said to me, I was in her room and we were just talking, and she had a bottle of frankincense sitting on her bedside table. And of course, these girls are going crazy right now. And she had a bottle of frankincense sitting on her bedside table. And I was like, what is that? Like, I know I've seen that from the Bible. She's like, yeah, it's from the Bible, and it's all the things that it talks about in the Bible. It's real. It does all these incredible things. Well, I had never heard of oils. I was, and when you're in the medical field, you're skeptical about things that aren't, maybe don't have all the science there, or maybe at the time they didn't have enough studies. And so anyway, she just said, you know what, just try some out and see what you think. So that kind of like was the beginning steps of all of this, of everything. And so it wasn't, again, like that blinking light that you're saying, that wasn't for me. It was just kind of sparked an interest, piqued my interest. And then I just kind of, oh my gosh, girls.
They want to be on the podcast too. It's fine.
Yeah, they're both puppies. So I should have expected this. So anyway, girls. So taking that path of natural health, natural wellness, and just integrating that into my life over the past couple of years, I stumbled upon Raindrop because I was still doing essential oils. And I actually got one done myself. Hi, Fifi. Hi. I actually got one done myself, and then she wanted to make an appearance. And so then after I had that one done, it was kind of like an aha moment for me. Okay, so the 7 years that you've been investing in research and doing all of these things, like educating people on oils just for fun, like this was that moment leading up to it. So yeah, that blinking light took a long time to like come to fruition, but it made sense because all of those little things I was doing that I had no idea why I was doing them, I just felt like I should be doing them, were building blocks to this moment of now opening my own space and having my own business. And so Raindrop Therapy tied into essential oils. And so it was just like that next step. And then there's just been continued steps after that, because it's like, I mentioned that domino effect, but it really is. It's like once you build your foundation, things just start to grow. And when you're consistent with something, people really are like, okay, she's serious about this. Because I think when I first started, people were like, it's a hobby. She likes essential oils, yada, yada, yada. But when you have a significant impact on the health of a family member or yourself, it changes you. And so whether or not people don't believe in this or that, it didn't matter to me because it affected my family positively. So I was like instantly like, this is my thing. So yeah, that thing took a lot of time to really present itself as like being the thing for me. But yeah, I think if you try things out, like you're saying, it's like, it's taking those risks while you're young. And I don't know, not to like quote Gary Vee here, but I follow him a lot. I don't know if you do on Instagram, but when you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you're still so young, but I think we perceive it as we're not that young. And so we shouldn't take risks because we have a family, or we have all these obligations, or maybe lots of bills to pay, or you want to take that trip, but we are still so young. And so I think, and I want to have kids. So I'm like, am I going to do this now, or am I going to wait 20 years from now? And so it was like, okay, all of the work you're doing and the risk together, it's like, it's just, a good explosion.
No, I love that. Well, and I think, the biggest thing for me is I ask myself, like, what's the worst that can happen? If the worst that can happen is like really bad, then I think about it a little more, right? If the worst that can happen is it just doesn't work, okay. So, because my own rule with myself is I don't risk what I can't afford to lose, whether that's time, or the money, or the whatever. There's always risk involved. So I look at it like an investment. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to throw this out there and see what happens. And sometimes you do great and sometimes you don't, just like investing, right? So, that's kind of, how I've done a lot of different things, with my businesses, because some of them weren't necessarily like giant passions of mine. It was just like I seen an opportunity, right?
Yes.
One of the things I want to ask you too, though, is, you've been on this journey now, you said, for almost a year. What are some of the valuable lessons that you've learned along the way now as a newer entrepreneur? And is there any advice that you would give to somebody who's kind of considering that transition from working for somebody else to working for themselves?
Yeah, so I had a lot to learn. When you're a nurse, you don't necessarily know a whole lot about business. So that was a huge thing to overcome for me. And I'm still like, having to learn about all these different things that maybe I didn't know before. And so my biggest piece of advice would be to network, and kind of how I said earlier, but even if it's on such a small level, once you find that thing that maybe you're interested in, start doing a little bit of networking, whether that's going to an event with women, like a wine event, or going to a retreat, whether it's a couple days, or joining Facebook groups where you have like-minded individuals, like-minded women, other business people, whatever it is, because, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but the people are the backbone of a business. And so you either have a lot of great people on your team, or you're struggling to find those people, and they're not just going to like throw themselves at you either. Like the foundation pieces, it's all been built, it's been built by hard work and grit and hustle. And so it's all the late nights where I'm tired and it's like, I really don't want to go to that networking event, even though I'm an extrovert. I am very much an extrovert. I love social settings, but sometimes I agree to something when I'm in a certain mood. And then that time shows up and you're like, I'm not in the same mood anymore. But I always force myself to go unless I'm sick, or I'm like, you know what, I really can't do this because I've gotten no sleep or whatever. I force myself. I'm like, no, I'm doing it. I made a commitment, and I stick to that commitment. And so I show up to a lot of social functions that maybe I don't want to because I'm exhausted, or I've had a hard day or a long day, but you continue to network because it's so important. It's so valuable. And so that may be not part of my work day, but it's something I always make a point in my week, a couple times a week. And kind of just referencing, so even just like being in BNI, like that's where I met Dr. TJ. And, I was in it for a couple years, then got out of it. And he was like, why don't you just come back? And me coming back, which I was not going to do, has been another huge catalyst in all of this, expanding and my business scaling. And so again, it's like, it's being open-minded, it's connecting with people, building those meaningful relationships. And also too, like, you can have a plan all you want, but be open to opportunities that come to you that maybe you weren't expecting, because there's been a lot of things that have presented itself to me. And I'm like, you know what, that's not really what I envisioned. That's not really what I wanted, or really what I thought was going to be the future for this. And I did it anyway, just to see where it would go. And there's been things that have like expanded my viewpoint that have now made a huge leap in my business. One of those, long story short, being I went to a business conference in Miami, which I was like not going to do. I'm like, this is not going to go anywhere. Needless to say, I met somebody who lives in Hawaii who's now helping me with speaking opportunities around the country and potentially in Hawaii too. So I just like, one little pebble turns into this huge stone. Like it's those little things. But I would say the best advice would be to create those meaningful relationships, not superficial, being authentic, showing up and really trying to connect with people and find those likenesses.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that you mentioned be authentic, because I know a lot of people, including myself at the very beginning, I would like think I only could show so much of my crazy personality because I'm a lot sometimes. So I would only like show up as like part of it because I was afraid, until I finally kind of like burst free of that mentality. Because the thing is if somebody's wanting to do business with me or network with me or whatever, sooner or later, I'm not going to be able to contain all of this, right? So it's going to come out anyway. So it's better if they know what they're getting into and they either love it, hate it, or whatever, and it took me a while to be comfortable with that. But I think sometimes, especially if you're new to the business world, I had come from corporate where it very much was expected to mask all day. Mm-hmm. So coming from that corporate mask mentality to going out on my own, I still thought I had to wear that mask, which is part of the reason I didn't want to be in corporate to begin with, because I didn't want to have to wear a mask. But it took some time to kind of get out of that mentality. I think a lot of people, struggle with just the idea of authenticity. Was that something that you struggled with, or was it something that came naturally?
Oh yeah. I, by nature, I'm a people pleaser. So I definitely, and also being a nurse too, it's like, you swallow a lot to make sure that you're presenting yourself in such a way and making sure that you're, you take a lot of hits as a nurse, figuratively, but, maybe some literally, but, so you have to kind of like just compartmentalize. But authenticity, like when you're a people pleaser and you want people, you're trying to, and also if you have that scarcity mindset, like, is this business going to work? Maybe you're in that mode of desperation, which I've been there too. Like I didn't know if it was going to work. And so it was like, I need clients, and that is such a different space than being like, I'm okay. I'm going to be who I am. And naturally those clients will come to me. And the more that I relaxed in it, the more the clients came to me. It's almost like, the manifestation aspect and putting things out into the universe. I manifested like being, not just being calm, but just sitting in who you are and being you. And then allowing that, because I'm like you, I am also wild and crazy too. And so there's different sides and different times for that. And I think a huge part of business for me has been adapting to different people's personalities, because you can't sometimes always be the same with this client that you're with this client. And so, I've learned more as even just a human being starting my own business than I have ever before, because of all the people that you encounter and how many different walks of life. And so to adapt to that and be able to kind of meet those people's needs. Authenticity was definitely something I struggled with, because I would always want to bring what that person wanted. And I still sometimes do, to kind of cater to the clients and things like that.
I think there's healthy levels of that.
A healthy level.
And there's unhealthy levels, right?
Exactly. So, but yes, like you're saying, they're gonna see who you are at some point or another anyway. So just be comfortable. It's almost like when you go on a first date, Exactly. So they're gonna see who you are in a couple of weeks anyway, or 6 months or whatever it is. And it's funny because I think you and I can both kind of agree on this. We've attracted certain people once we've stepped into who we are. And I wasn't doing that as a nurse. And so towards the end of my nursing, and I still do function as a nurse, occasionally here and there, but towards the end, when I was like fully stepping away, I finally accepted, I don't know what shifted in my brain, but it was finally just like, you know what, screw it. Like, I'm just going to be this way. Like, this is who I am. And clients are going to either come to me or they're not. And it just kind of like, it snowballed, and I felt like I got super busy right away. And back to what my friends were saying, they were like, oh, you're so lucky. And it's like maybe some of it's luck, but my dad always said when I was little to my brothers and I, the harder you work, the luckier you get. So it might appear to be luck, but it's all of that time that is built It's a compound effect of Dr. TJ will love this, simple actions done right over time. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I know that a lot of people don't share during those times because they're too busy and they're not sure what to share. And so when they start sharing what they've done, it's usually when they've already gone through like a lot of that stuff. And I think that's why people accidentally think that, it's luck or whatever, is because they don't get to see that intimate
Sure.
details of all the times where you fell on your face, you thought about quitting, all that stuff, because that happens. I'd say I have not talked to an entrepreneur ever at this point that has not had those moments where they're like, I don't know if this is for me. I just need to give up. I don't know if I can do this, because there are amazing parts of entrepreneurship and there's some hard parts, but I think it's when you get into your stride, not that there's still not days where you're like, okay, well, that part sucked, but for the most part, you get into your stride, it is a lot easier. It's the same thing as like if you're climbing a mountain, right? That uphill is treacherous and it's hard and you want to stop and you go back down and you don't want to do it, and you get to the top and it's like, wow, okay, and then you got the journey down, right, which is a little bit easier, but sometimes there's still some treacherous parts, right? And I think it's kind of that same idea, but a lot of people don't notice that climb up. They see at the top and then see the little bit of an easier journey. So I mean, I think that that's a common misconception for people. And I also think that limits people from stepping out as readily and trying to do whatever it is they're feeling like they want to do with their own entrepreneurship journey, because they're only seeing that front end, that finished product or semi-finished product, and they're not sure that they can do that. And that's even like was a catalyst for this entire show to begin with, was to show like some of those messier parts, because when I was in kind of my own journey, I was looking for stuff like that. I mean, yes, I wanted to hear the success stories and, oh, I did this and that's great, and here's how you do that. That was very helpful. But I also wanted to hear that no matter what was going on in my life, I could also do that, right? No matter what was going on, it was an option for me, because my life is busy and crazy and lots of things, like a lot of us have. And I kept looking for somebody that was like me, right? To be able to identify with, to say, oh, okay, well, they don't have, that perfect scenario set up that, that like, I mean, I got a lot of kids, right? I got a lot of things going on. I needed to see something that didn't look like that perfect journey, and that was harder to find. And I love having these conversations. I just love you, like I said, but I love having these conversations because from the moment I met you, you were very real, very genuine, and I like having conversations with people like that. I do want to ask you before we kind of start to wrap up a little bit, but how do you find the balance between business and taking care of yourself physically and emotionally? Because I know that can be a challenge, because a lot of times, again, we put our own needs on the back burner, and we're just trying to like barrel full force with our business and doing all the things. Are there some things that you can share that you have made a point to do to be able to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, so you can show up better for your business? Because I think sometimes that takes some time to learn that.
It takes so much time, and I'm still learning that too. I definitely prioritize self-care. I feel like that's a huge reason of why I allowed myself, going back to that risk again, like allowed myself to take the risk, because I do prioritize that, but it's hard. I mean, it's very hard. It takes sacrifice, right? So what is that piece that you want to sacrifice? Is it sleep, or is it maybe time with friends, or time with family, or TV time, or whatever that might be? But in order to get all the things done that you want, there's just not enough hours in the day. And so at some point you have to prioritize and sacrifice. And another big piece for me, so that was a huge part, was like figuring out what I can sacrifice. But another huge piece was delegation. Being type A, wanting to like do everything myself, because it's so easy to get wrapped in the mindset that if you don't do it yourself, it's not going to be done the way you want it to be done. And so even as a nurse, like I would always, I never used to accept help. I'm like, no, I got it. Like I'll do it. Even something so basic like walking a patient out, I'm like, nope, I'm going to walk my own patient out. Like, so I just having your own business, you can't do it all. It's really difficult. And so I've had to learn like healthy delegation, like even with my husband, like, hey, could you do this for me? That way I can get all of these things done. So delegating, whether it's in your personal life to a partner, a spouse or a child, maybe that they could help out with something for you. And then delegating in your business too, because I think we try to take everything on because we want it done a certain way. But then it just can't all get done. And so I think it's like releasing expectations, delegating those things. And then, but there is some sort of healthy sacrifice too that has to be made. Because if it were easy, they say this all the time, but if it were easy, everybody would do it. It's not easy. And so the massive growth that I feel like I've had is like I said, when I'm exhausted and I don't want to go to that after hours, or I don't want to go to that social thing at 7:00 at night, my work day is finally wrapping up and winding down. And it's like, I really don't want to do that. I go anyway. I do it anyway. Even if I just show up, and it always happens, I leave there feeling so incredible when you walk in and you're exhausted and you're like, man, I'm so glad I did that. I love reminding myself of that when I don't want to do something, because it's always worth it. Always worth it in the end.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that sometimes you're not going to feel like it, and I think that that's a huge thing, because, I've done some motivational speaking, and I think it's funny because, motivation is one of those really funny words. Like I love to be motivated, but I don't always feel motivated. And the thing is nobody does. Nobody always feels motivated there. And that's where discipline comes in, right? So it's deciding what you want to do and why. And then on the days you're not motivated, because it's going to happen, you use the discipline on those days. Use the motivation on the days you have it, and use the discipline on the days you don't. And I think that is a huge thing to remember, because I think entrepreneurs, especially earlier on in their journey, that's, I think, a lot of times a thing that causes some issues with them, is because sometimes they don't feel motivated. They're like, oh man, maybe this is not for me. So then they start all the self-doubt and like all the other things that happen from that, instead of realizing that that is a normal part of the journey. You're going to be motivated some days, and you're going to not be motivated some days, and that is okay. So, if it's still something that needs to be done, that's where discipline kicks in. And maybe sometimes it doesn't need to be done and it can be moved, whatever. But, you're not always going to have that motivation. And, I think that is a, key point, to think about. I have one more question to ask you. Looking back on your journey from, leaving your job as a nurse and starting your own business, what's the most significant takeaway or lesson that you'd like the listeners to remember and apply to their own journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, and this is even outside of business, is the growth that I've had in my own personal life. Because it's like you're taking a bet on yourself, and all the things that you learn along the way that you're not taught in school, that maybe your parents didn't teach you. You start to like celebrate these little victories, even outside of your business. Like other little things started falling into place in my world. And it was like, oh, wow, that's really neat that happened. And looking back, it's because of all the things that I've been learning, all of the little tiny lessons, because you do fail. I mean, I'm my first year in my business. There's been a lot of no's. I've had a lot of doors shut in my face. A lot of people tell me no. A lot of people tell me what I do is, whether they don't believe in it or they're skeptical of it, and heard it all. So I think just like pushing past that and believing in yourself, which again, some days is hard because you wake up and you're like, what am I even doing? Like some days I still have that. I'm like, am I doing, like, what am I doing today? I don't even know that I should be doing what I'm doing. And it's like, you have those days of self-doubt, but then you have other days where you're like, no, this is why I'm doing this. These are the reasons why, because that why that we usually have as entrepreneurs, there's a fire under there. And the personal growth that you have when you step out and try new things, take risks, and bet on yourself and believe in yourself is just incredible. All the different pieces of your life start to come together, and all the solid rocks of your family, whether it's a marriage or your kids or finances or health and wellness, fitness, physique, whatever it is, it's like things start to align because you've given yourself freedom and also belief and a healthy confidence level too. So I think, the biggest thing is like take those risks. That's been a huge theme of this talk, but take those risks, believe in yourself, and be authentic in who you are. And truly the universe brings you the right people that you need. So.
100%. I love that. So let everybody know where they can find you, follow you, find out about a little bit of what you do. I mean, obviously what you do is very, in person on a lot of things, but I mean, if they want to follow you or, whatever, if you can give them kind of where that is.
Sure. So I do have a personal page, but my business page is That Oily Chick. So That Oily CHICC. It's on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. I try to update that daily with different educational reels and posts and things like that. My website is dropsofhealth.com. I've got 2 locations in Lebanon and Blue Ash for treatments with Dr. TJ. And so I would love to connect via social media or obviously through website or in person, which is even better, my favorite.
All right. Well, I love that. And for anybody that's listening on the podcast, the links to all the things that Carly just said will be in the show notes for you to click through and find out a little bit more about Carly. I've loved this conversation. I mean, I knew I would because I've loved talking to you. And I know the last time I seen you, we just kept talking and talking and talking and talking.
Yeah,
because
hours later.
Yeah, hours later. Usually it is. It's like so long later. I'm like, wait, it's been such a long time.
Yeah.
So, but no, I love that.
Working.
And that's the thing. Like, that's going to be the negative about being in the same space sometimes together is I don't know how much we're going to get done. Like, we're going to have some TV. All right, so if you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure if you're not already following us, you subscribe to our podcast. Share this episode with somebody that would find it helpful, and we will see you all next time.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic lights.